Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello, sir. My name is Leilani Azalia Putri. So, first of all, I would like to thank you for giving me the opportunity to present my article. And right now, I will present a research entitled Shifting Signals Emoji Meaning Change Across Generational Groups in Digital Communication. So, in this presentation, I will briefly explain the background, literature review, methodology, findings and discussion, and the conclusion of this study. So without further ado, let's move on to the background. So in today's digital era, people communicate more through social media and messaging applications such as WhatsApp, Instagram, and X. So because of this, emojis have become an important part of daily communication, and they are not only used to express emotions but also to convey attitude, humor, sarcasm, and other implied meanings. However, the same emoji can be interpreted differently by different generations. For example, the emoji smile is usually understood as a friendly smile by older generations, while many Gen Z users interpret it as sarcasm or passive aggression. So, this difference may lead to misunderstanding uh, in digital communication. Therefore, this study aims to analyze how emoji meaning shift across generations from a pragmatic perspective. So after explaining the background, I would like to explain why I choose this topic. So there are two reasons why I chose this topic. First is that emojis are widely used in everyday communication, making this topic relevant to our daily lives. Second, although many researchers have studied emojis, only a few have focused on generational differences using pragmatic theories. So, therefore, I believe this topic is interesting because it combines digital communication with linguistic analysis. And next, I will explain the research gap addressed in this study. So, after reviewing previous studies, I found that most researchers focused on emoji sentiment, emotional expression, or general digital communication. However, only a few studies compare how different generations interpret the same emojis. In addition, the use of Grice's cooperative principle and relevance theory to explain these differences is still limited. Therefore, this study attempts to fill that gap by analyzing emoji meaning shifts from a pragmatic perspective. Based on this research gap, the study addresses two research questions. So, this study aims to answer two main research questions. The first question is, what types of semantic and pragmatic shifts can be observed in commonly used emojis when interpreted by Generation Z compared to Generation X and Millennials? And the second question is, how does Grice's cooperative principle explain these general differences? So these questions guide the entire research process, from data collection to data analysis. And now I will move on to the literature review, which provides the theoretical foundation for this study. So to support this research, I reviewed several previous studies related to emoji interpretation. For example, Riordan 2017 explains that emojis function as pragmatic tools, not just emotional symbols. And then Miller, 2016, found that people often interpret the same emoji differently depending on the context. Meanwhile, Rahimi, 2025, showed that emoji meanings can vary across generations due to different communication habits. These previous studies provide a strong foundation for my research. However, most of them focus on emotional expression or technology, while only a few discuss generational differences from a pragmatic perspective. Therefore, this study aims to fill that gap. So, after reviewing previous studies, I will now explain the theories used in this research. So, this research is based on two main theories. The first is Grice's cooperative principle, which explain that effective communication depends on cooperation between the speaker and the listener. Grice introduced four conversational maxims, which is quantity, quality, relation, and manner. So, when these maxims are intentionally floated, people usually understand the implied meaning, or what we call conversational implicator. The second theory is relevance theory, proposed by Sperber and Wilson. This theory explains that people interpret messages based on context and the most relevant meaning. These two theories, these two theories help explain why the same emoji can have different meanings for different generations. So after discussing the theoretical framework, I will now explain the research methodology. This study uses a qualitative descriptive method because this purpose is to analyze meaning rather than numerical data. The data consists of 35 examples of emoji use collected from WhatsApp, Instagram, and X. The research focuses on three emojis, which are smile emojis, the skull emojis, and the crying emoji, because these emojis show significant meaning shifts across generations. After collecting the data, each emoji was analyzed using Grice's cooperative principle and relevance theory to identify its semantic and pragmatic changes. This methodology allows the researcher to understand not only what the meaning shifts are, but also why they happen. And now that I have explained the methodology, I will move on to the findings and discussion, which are the main focus of this research. Now I will present the main findings of this study. Overall, the results show that emoji meanings are not fixed. Instead, they change depending on the user's generation and communication context. This study focuses on three emojis that show significant meaning shifts, which are smile emoji, skull emoji, and crying emoji. The analysis compares how these emojis are interpreted by Generation Z and Generation X, or millennials, and the findings are explained using pragmatic theories. So let's start with the first emoji. The first emoji is the slightly smiling face. So for many Generation X and millennial users, this emoji simply expresses politeness or friendliness. However, Gen Z often uses it to express sarcasm, passive aggression, or emotional distance. This shows that the meaning of the emoji has shifted from a literal expression to an implied meaning. According to Grass's cooperative principle, this can be explained through conversational implicator, where the real meaning depends on context rather than the emoji itself. The next emoji shows an even more interesting meaning shifts. So the second emoji is the skull emoji. Traditionally, this emoji represents death or danger. However, among Gen Z, it usually means I'm dying of laughter or that's extremely funny. So this meaning is understood because users share the same internet culture and communication habits. From a pragmatic perspective, the emoji creates an implied meaning that is very different from its literal meaning. And the last emoji analyzed in this study is the loudly crying face emoji. So older generations generally associate this emoji with sadness or disappointment. In contrast, Gen Z often uses it to express happiness, excitement, gratitude, or being emotionally overwhelmed. This shows that the same emoji can communicate different emotions depending on the context and the user's shared understanding. So again, this finding supports the idea that emoji interpretation is influenced by pragmatic meaning rather than literal meaning. After discussing each emoji, so let's look at the overall finding across different platforms. So the study also found that emoji use varies across different digital platforms. On X, emojis are often used sarcastically or humorously. On Instagram, emoji meanings are supported by photos and captions, so the context is usually clearer. Meanwhile, on WhatsApp, misunderstandings are more likely to occur because people from different generations often communicate with each other. These findings show that both generation and communication platform influence emoji interpretation. And finally, I will explain what these findings mean from a pragmatic perspective. So, based on these findings, it can be concluded that emoji meanings are shaped by context, culture, and shared experience. Grice's cooperative principle explains how people understand implied meanings through conversational implicator. Meanwhile, relevance theory explains why different generations may interpret the same emoji differently based on their background and knowledge and communication habits. Therefore, emoji communication is not only about the symbol itself, but also about how people understand it in a particular context. So, after discussing the findings, I will now conclude this presentation. So, this study shows that emoji meanings have changed across different generations. The same emoji can carry different meanings depending on the user's age, communication habits, and context. The findings also show that Grace's cooperative principle and relevance theory are useful for explaining why these differences occur. Overall, this research highlights the importance of understanding context when interpreting emojis in digital communication. Besides answering the research question, this study also provides several contributions. So, this study makes both theoretical and practical contributions. Theoretically, it shows that pragmatic theories such as Grice's cooperative principle and relevance theory can still be applied to modern digital communication. Practically, it helps people understand that emojis should not always be interpreted literally, especially when communicating with people from different generations. So, this understanding can help reduce misunderstandings in everyday communication. And finally, I would like to end my presentation. So, to conclude, emojis are more than just digital symbols. Their meanings continue to change as language and communication evolve. Therefore, understanding these changes is important for building more effective communication across. So, to conclude, emojis are more than just digital symbols. Their meanings continue to change as language and communication evolve. Therefore, understanding these changes is important for building more effective communication across generations. So, thank you very much for your attention, sir. I'm Leilani Azalia Putri. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.